to Generation Next, Life and Politics with Chuck Hobbs. It's Sunday, December 9th, and we're here, as we promised, each week to discuss all of the hot topics occurring in our state, our nation, as well as around the world. No delay, right off top, some of the issues I want to talk about today are obviously stand your ground over in Jacksonville. Jordan Davis becomes the second young African-American male to lose his life to an older white male who shot for being afraid, for lack of a better word. I want to talk about that. I want to talk a little bit today about Ambassador Susan Rice and the Benghazi issue that just won't seem to go away. Also want to talk something about this fiscal cliff. Is the cliff really that big of a deal or not? Is this much ado about nothing? And likewise, we'd like to talk about the tragic death of Javon Belcher, as well as Cassie Perkins, his fiance, who was killed in a murder-suicide. They both died in a murder-suicide last week. To my left, we have Cedric Jones. We have Zach Ward, an attorney here in Tallahassee, Florida, as well as my friend Liz Ritchie, another attorney. Gang, how are you doing?
I'm excited to be here.
Okay, it's been about a month since we've been able to sit and talk again. And
got some new digs, too.
Right. I'm kind of liking this. We've got some pretty good feedback. What about you all? After the first show, did you get good feedback from friends, family, and what have you?
Yeah. Pretty much everybody just liked the show. They just liked the fact that we had some local coverage going on that they could tune into and just watch as the election went on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like the fact that I heard good feedback that we were able to talk about stuff and be able to talk about it for more than 15 seconds before someone else yelled at that person.
Absolutely.
People were excited about that.
Absolutely. What about you, Liz?
Right, that respectful tone, I think people really appreciated. It wasn't antagonistic and disrespectful, so I think that there's an audience for that.
Very good. Well, let's jump right in. I want to talk about Jordan Davis's death. Now, we've read the headlines over the last few days. 17 years old, sitting in a car, SUV, with a bunch of his friends. This could have been me 20-something years ago when I was a kid, listening to music pretty loudly. From what I understand, I believe he was an honor student. And you have a young man, Michael Gunn, 44 years old. I had to throw it out there, white male, does the shooting. He claims that it was self-defense. Claims that he saw a gun, but when law enforcement came in Jacksonville, Jacksonville law enforcement came, they didn't find any weapons.
Right.
What are y'all's thoughts about this? After all of the protesting we've had to deal with Trayvon Martin this year, Al Sharpton pretty much pitched camp here in Florida for the better part of March and April until some charges came against George Zimmerman, and now Florida is right back in the headlines again. Gang, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is a situation, I can see exactly how this happens. Two guys are at a gas station, music's loud. I have no idea what kind of music it is or what they're saying in the music. It says, hey, why don't you turn the music down? Probably gets a response slightly in the negative. And it's none of your business, and I can see how it could escalate from there. Guy says he saw a gun. It's one of those cases we'll never know the truth. I know that there's no gun when the police get there, but you know, there's a lot of other people, a lot of ways a gun can disappear if there was. We will never know exactly what happened. I have no idea if they have any of this on videotape. If it was in a parking lot in the gas station as it was originally described, there should at least be one videotape angle where we can we won't have audio. They never do. But I have a feeling we're never going to know what actually happened.
Well, one of the good things is that they did get an arrest early on in this case. I think the thing that caused much angst with Trayvon Martin was that it took almost 50 days for law enforcement or for the prosecutor's office to finally press charges. In fact, Governor Scott had to get rid of the prosecutor, Norm Wolfinger, and insert Angela Corey out of Jacksonville just to press those charges. But at least in this situation, and I thought it to be somewhat ironic that it's Angela Corey's jurisdiction again that will press the charges against Michael Gunn. Cedric, what's some of your concerns about this?
My biggest concern when I was going through articles or whatever was released was the multiple gunshots. Okay, I can see one, maybe two, but no return fire. Was there return fire?
No.
Okay.
No return fire. From what I understand, no weapons were found.
So, well, the weapon thing that's neither here nor there right now because they still have to corroborate stories, and we got to find out if stories are right. And like Zach said, we got to find out if there was some videotape on the premises to videotape this. But multiple gunshots, if it was more than five, what are you shooting at? I mean, how much do you have to defend yourself if you did feel threatened, right? Because I can't say in his shoes, did he feel threatened or not? I can't say, oh, you didn't feel threatened. You just was just shooting in the car as a black kid. But how much did you feel threatened that you have to do, pretty much unload your clip into a car?
Liz, what are your thoughts about this?
I think it's a race issue, clearly. And I think that to say that it's self-defense, what was he defending himself from? Defending himself from loud music does not require 8 or 9 shots. And his attorney is saying that he acted like any responsible gun owner. I don't think a responsible gun owner is going to pull out his gun after maybe seeing something in a car that was not in his face, in his personal space. And I think a responsible gun owner probably would have just left the scene and not pulled out a gun and shot 8 or 9 times just in a car. The kid was hit twice.
Well, Liz, you raised an interesting point. You said that you do believe that it's a race issue, and I too believe that it's a race issue. But I think that part of the problem is that you have, and we have to talk about this, why is it that so many white males in particular, and Zach, I'm sorry, but you're the one white male we have here today.
Very much in particular.
Exactly. Why is it that so many white males have this visceral, gut-level fear of young black males? Is it warranted? Is it not warranted? Zach, talk to me a little bit about that.
I guess you could probably argue statistically, maybe, as far as the violent crime statistics and who does commit them. But I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I mean, I don't know exactly what neighborhood this occurred in Jacksonville, and if there's 4 or 5 kids in a car and their response to turn down the radio is, you know, shut up or I'm going to kill you, man, or what, I have no idea what they said.
Or something maybe far more profane.
I'm sure it was, but this is going to be
Sure,
Sunday.
right. Yeah, family hour. Right.
Family hour. Did the guy feel threatened? I don't know. Hopefully he felt threatened. Otherwise, he's just blazing away in a parking lot. Did he behave as a responsible gun owner? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. But the standard in the law is not, are you a responsible gun owner? That's not the standard. The standard is you feel threatened with imminent physical injury or death. And I don't know how close he was to the kid. Who knows? As far as I don't think if every white man was really scared of black guys, I'd be terrified right now because I'm in between 2 guys that are a lot bigger than me.
Right, but our brains are larger than even the body. right.
I think there is something to that. A lot of it is stereotypical.
Sure.
Unfortunately, as in many stereotypes, some of it's based in fact, just statistically. But, you know, a lot of older white men are just as scared of packs of white teenagers.
Well, let me ask this, though. If you're an older white guy who's scared of young black kids playing loud music, why do you go up to them and say, turn it down?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
You would think you just mind his business, so to speak.
Right.
Just get in the car and ride on. You can change the scenery.
Testosterone
or
changes
go to a
things.
different. I've done it myself. I have gotten in a parking lot to get gas, and I said, I don't like my surroundings. I'm a woman by myself. I'm going to go to another gas station or go further down in the same gas. It doesn't make sense.
But that's practicing common sense.
Right.
And as we know in our community, we always say common sense is definitely not common.
It's not so common. Exactly.
Right. So,
and at the same time, I like, Liz, how you said that, as well as you, Zach, in terms of Cedric and I both know that what sometimes is considered to be racist is common sense. Like, to give you a classic example, I wouldn't necessarily want my mom or my wife necessarily driving in certain areas of town. Let's just be real.
Right.
And so with that in mind, it makes this whole situation more muddy because at the end of the day, the question is, at the same time, like Zach says, statistically speaking, are some white males given, or white females, we haven't had a white female shoot a black male yet, but statistically speaking, it does make a little bit of sense that some people might have a heightened sense of fear based upon the robberies, the murders, and the muggings that go on, and we have to talk about that.
now, the one thing that's not being talked about much in this case is just gun control, period. Now, I'm not a big fan of controlling guns. I believe that everybody should have the right to bear arms. I'm not going to go off on a tirade like Bob Costas did either in the Belcher case.
Right.
But you have to wonder, could this have been alleviated if there was some stricter gun control, not just the banishment of just having a gun, period, right? I mean, because that's for him to pull it, unholster it, if that's what he
Load
indeed, yeah, you know, it's supposed to be unloaded, right?
Good
In a
point.
case.
It took some time. It took some deliberation. and some
He
time
had to have
do it.
some
Right,
thinking
he went
behind
through.
it.
He did go through all those steps. He
Okay, so
loaded that gun.
Okay,
in the
so
parking
there's
lot.
some there's some thought process that went through that whole thing. So I know that's one thing that's not being talked about.
And Cedric, that's so interesting that you say that because pre-stand your ground, that was the old common law rule about deliberation, a time to reflect, to cool off before having to use deadly force.
Right.
And as we get ready to segue to another topic, I have to ask predictions. Do you think that because of Trayvon and because of now Jordan, that we're going to find that the legislature in the spring will address and perhaps even repeal or augment?
I just think it's vague. Don't you think it's a vague?
Well, all I can tell you, having actually defended these cases in Florida, far more young black men have benefited from the stand your ground law as far as handling individual cases than old white men. It's actually assisted more young black men than old white men. So you need to think about that before you ask for, get what you wish for.
Yeah.
The only thing I can sympathize with Mr. Gunn about is I hate loud music in cars.
Well, did you see what the reaction is, though, that people are saying in response, play your music really loud in your car? And I don't think that that's an effective way to honor the young man who died or to combat things like that happening again.
Not in the same light as the hood thing they
That's
did.
not going to solve anything.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
that's more of a statement than the loud music would be.
Well, in the days ahead, we definitely will be paying close attention to this. Our condolences, clearly, with the show, go out to the family of Jordan Davis, and we hope that justice is served. Hold that thought. We'll be right back with Generation Next, Life and Politics with Chuck Hobbs and friends. Welcome back to Generation Next, Life and Politics with Chuck Hobbs and friends. When we left off, we were talking about race, and we were talking about the aspect of how race plays a role in so many of the national as well as international issues that we're dealing with. I want to talk a little bit about Susan Rice. Ambassador Susan Rice, we all know back in September that she made the rounds of the morning talk shows one Sunday after the Benghazi, Libya massacre, where Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans lost their lives. We now know that she, as well as the Obama administration, has maintained that those were the talking points that were given to them by the CIA. But over the course of the last 8 weeks, Republicans, most notably John McCain, as well as Lindsey Graham, have fired up the drumbeat in terms of saying that she's incompetent, the Obama administration was incompetent in its handling of Libya, and in response to that, the Congressional Black Caucus in the last 30 days has gone on a counteroffensive, basically saying that calling her incompetent is a race issue. It's also a sexist issue. What are your thoughts on that? Liz, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. I think even as recently as Thursday, McCain has backed off a little bit on that. And it turns out, I think that the Director of National Intelligence is the one who said that they redacted the references to al-Qaeda and that it was an actual terrorist attack. I think that no matter who had made the comments, that the Republicans would come up with some comments that somebody's going to find somehow offensive. I don't think that this in particular is a race or a sex issue, but we're going to make it into some kind of an issue. And I think that she used what she was given, and nobody made a big production about when Colin Powell did that, and we spent billions of dollars going and finding weapons of mass destruction that were not there, and that was not the result of her going on those shows and making those comments. So I think she's getting a lot less, she's getting a lot more slack than others got who deserved a lot more. But I wouldn't be surprised if the real reason is to try to get John Kerry appointed as Secretary of State so we have a new Republican senator in his place.
I am hearing that. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Well,
is it a race issue, Zach?
Well, the Congressional Black Caucus, and then I think a subset of that, the female caucus, came out and said this is sexist and this is racist by the Republicans. I may have a short memory, but I remember a female black Secretary of State named Rice that was a Republican that was in there not too long ago. So I doubt that their opposition is based on the sex or the race of Miss Rice. By any Washington standard, she seems to meet the minimum qualifications that would take to be Secretary of State. I can understand their objection based on the Benghazi scenario because it seems pretty clear one of two things happened. You know, the administration had to send somebody out to talk, and the talk that they sent out was clearly BS. I mean, I don't think anyone believes what they had to say was true on that Sunday morning. She drew the short straw. They sent her. It's not her fault. It's her boss's fault that she's in this predicament now. But, one of two things happened. She believed this theory that they had of why these attacks occurred. And if she believed the theory, she probably isn't qualified to be Secretary of State because it's ludicrous. If she was just doing what her boss said, then she probably still is qualified to be Secretary of State, even though it was clearly kind of dishonest what she was saying.
Cedric?
I just think the whole situation is comical now. When the story first broke and John McCain, of all people, was throwing around the word incompetence, which I've written on Facebook. The word incompetence has been thrown around just incorrectly all over the place. Incompetence coming from John McCain is like is the biggest insult. I mean, this man finished second to the last in his class in the academy.
And it didn't hurt that his dad was an admiral in the Navy.
Okay,
for
so
him to get to the academy in the first place.
I don't want to knock his military record,
Right, because he did stay in the Hanoi Hilton for a long time.
Clearly, he is not the smartest man on the planet. Okay,
True.
so he served. I'm glad that he served. More power to you. Don't call a person incompetent because that's just the first word that came to mind. If you think she's not qualified, say she's not qualified because of X, Y, Z. I think that she is just as qualified probably as anybody else to do Secretary of State right now. I'm not a big fan of John Kerry. I don't know if I'm a big fan of Susan Rice as far as just taking this job. I would like to see somebody else that's either served in that capacity in the past or someone who's actually serving in that capacity as a de facto Secretary of State or whatever. But the whole race issue, to get back to the race issue, coming from a black perspective, I can see where those statements could be considered racist or sexist or whatever ist you want to put on it. But I can also see where a person is just using the wrong word. Incompetence is not the word you should use. I believe that it's the second theory that you had, that she was just following orders. She did draw the short straw. She got her neck put on the chopping block. She was the good little soldier, and eventually she'll get rewarded for that. If Secretary of State is her reward, then so be it. I think that she probably will be rewarded later on in her career, whatever she's aspiring to be. All right?
I agree.
I think there'll be some book deals. I think there'll be some other things that'll happen for her that'll put Susan Rice on the map of Condoleezza Rice, because they were both accomplished women in their own right.
No doubt about it.
I mean, you got one that's pretty much a genius and another one that was close to it, right? So,
and one of the things you have to really admire is that since Warren Christopher left the position in 1997, each of the secretaries of state that we have had since then has either been a woman or a minority. So that in and of itself is progress over the course of the last 15 years.
I'm with Zach, and I don't and Liz. I don't think it can be misconstrued as race, but I think that's really thin. I do believe that Republicans are a little sore though. So whatever happens that's got anything tied with President Obama, I think is something they would jump on.
Well, with that sore, Zach, I want to field this question to you first. Fiscal cliff. We're in a position now where we have barely 25 days left in the month, 20-something days left in the month as of today. Are we going to go over the fiscal cliff? And more importantly, if we do, is it even that crucial? And let me say where I'm coming from on that first. I just got through reading a report from the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan group that analyzes everything coming out of Washington, D.C. And they have essentially said that if we go over the cliff, there will be some short-term strain next year. The GDP may contract by 1.3%. Unemployment may rise back up to 9.2%. But long-term, with the additional revenue, that it would, by the middle of this decade, toward the end of the decade, have us pretty much heading back toward where things were during the Clinton era. So I have to ask, is going over the cliff that big of a deal, or is this just something that's selling newspapers and keeping people going to blogs? Zach, what's your thought?
We've been going over the cliff since the 30s. Okay, This is just the culmination. And the current crisis that we have that's in the news is a crisis that was generated only last year by the same people who are pointing fingers at each other. When they appointed that super committee that was supposed to solve everything, and if they didn't solve everything, we'd have the fiscal cliff. Of course, the Republicans and the Democrats both appointed, the biggest partisans, so you knew they weren't going to solve anything in that committee. The aforementioned John Kerry was one of them.
Right.
And if we can keep him out of the Secretary of State, that'll be well done too. But we knew this was going to happen, and so both the Republicans in the House, Democrats in the Senate, and the president all built this. This is by design that we're headed to this so-called cliff. Now, how do we solve the cliff? How are they? Well, we have to reduce spending and raise taxes. Okay, how do we do this? Well, they're offering the same solutions the two parties have been offering us since before I was born. One wants to reduce taxes, one wants to raise revenues. Guess what happens if we go over the fiscal cliff? We're raising taxes and we're reducing spending. We're doing exactly what they want them to do. This has all been manipulated. The White House knows the press is going to blame the Republicans when it's everybody's fault, so they're going to benefit politically. But if nothing gets done, we're in the same boat anyway. We're already spending money we don't have. Clearly, it's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. The White House is still playing the game. We need the top 2% to pay more. But if we follow the White House's plan, that'll strip a lot of money from some people, and it'll pay for the government to run for 8 days.
And I agree, it is a spending problem. The problem is no one can agree on what spending to cut. Because I just had a conversation the other day, just a random conversation about my thoughts on the cutting of spending, and I also do believe that we need to do something about revenue, and I do believe that we need to. We talked about this before, actually going through the tax code and really cleaning it up and not just patchworking it. A conversation about autistic kid over in Jacksonville that's going to lose some coverage if they decide to cut some of the spending from some of the Affordable Health Care Act. And do the whole demeanor was, do you want to take that spending away from that autistic kid? And I'm like, no, I don't want to take spending away from anybody. But there are going to have to be some tough decisions made. That's not going to be the only kid that may end up being caught by a cut in spending. There may be a kid in Texas that may get caught by a kid in California. Are you going to go and lobby for every kid that's going to lose some spending? Every adult that may be benefiting from some adult education programs? Some of the stuff is going to have to get cut out. But the argument is, what do we cut?
And nobody can agree. Liz,
Yeah.
Your thoughts on this?
I don't think there is an actual cliff. I think that's some doomsday propaganda, basically. I think it's more like a slope. And I would agree with you, Cedric, that this will force reform. Whether we come to an agreement timely or not, this will have to force some tax reform, which is very much needed. I think if we don't timely come to an agreement, that it will give the administration an advantage, and it would be to the disadvantage of the Republicans. So I agree with you in that respect, and I think everyone will blame the Republicans if it's not worked out.
Yeah.
It's going to work out. We're not going to fall off of the edge of the world, and if you think that we are, I have some dehydrated food I'd like to sell you on December 21st.
Understood. And December 21st, obviously, the Mayans claiming that the world is going to end.
If you think there's a cliff,
Right.
I believe the government.
21st,
I believe the government wants to feel needed.
Right. And I think more than anything is, like Cedric was alluding to, one of the issues is how do you cut? Obviously, many Republicans are pro-defense spending and what have you. Don't want to cut the military, and then obviously many Democrats don't want to touch entitlements like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid,
or any other social programs that
right.
people, Planned Parenthood, all these programs that get funded, they don't want to cut anything. And by the way, just to throw this out, Republicans like to throw around the idea that Planned Parenthood supports this notion of abortion. Planned Parenthood was never started for that. It was started as a program for people to go get informed about things that they may need, prenatal vitamins, medical procedures, making sure that you're going to get your checkups, mammograms, all this stuff. It was started as and then it's turned into this big, but I'm going on a tangent, I'm sorry.
Right, we'll have to definitely have a show about Planned Parenthood. We could talk a little bit about
Right.
Margaret Sanger and eugenics and all kind of good stuff that we could get into on that one. But Cedric, you raise an interesting issue as we start to wind down. I definitely want to talk and extend our show's condolences to the families of both Javon Belcher as well as Cassandra Cassie Perkins. 24 years old, Javon. I believe Miss Perkins was 22 years old. Mr. Belcher, linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs, last week shot Miss Perkins multiple times, killed her. They have a 4-month-old daughter that they've left. lots of issues have come out over the course of the last week. And
Right.
when you're talking about cutting and spending, oftentimes mental health programs, more often than not, are on the chopping blocks. On the state level, obviously that doesn't necessarily deal from the federal. But the question is, you're seeing a lot of people now, even I think I have read 2 or 3 articles in the last 3 or 4 days about football, the violence in football, the head injuries that emanate from football, and whether that causes some type of mania. Now, Cedric and I both played some football. Cedric far better and far more pronounced than I was. But at the same time, I'd like to start with you on that, Ced. What's your thoughts?
I can tell you that whatever chemicals are released in your body when you are playing football, and it's, you know, you're at the top of a profession, and it's just raging. It's like a teenager with raging hormones.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the chemical reaction gets the better of you. Now, in the case of a Belcher, I don't know what all of the story is as far as his mental state and that kind of thing. I'm still on the same issue as I am with the Jacksonville issue. Picking up a gun, don't care how sick you are mentally. I know that may cause you to think some things and may be delusional multiple times. And I'm pretty sure a 6'5", 250 some odd linebacker is not threatened by.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
No.
so there was my first reaction on Facebook was, this guy better be mentally, unstable,
Mm-hmm.
or I know I may take a trip out, to
Right.
Kansas City and may do some protesting myself, because that's a very heinous crime. And if he was pretending to be sick or was sick or whatever the issue was, it better be mental illness. It better be some serious mental illness, because if a guy takes that way out and then decides he's going to make that way out for his spouse or his girlfriend or his child's mom or whatever, that it should be some kind of punishment available for folks like that, even after. You know what I mean?
It is frustrating.
That's very frustrating.
And I thought it was somewhat ironic that this happened days after the Real Sports segment on HBO aired last week with Bryant Gumbel
Right.
on Ray Caruth, and how Ray Caruth had facilitated the murder of his fiance, I don't even want to call her fiance, his girlfriend,
Right.
who had given birth to his child back in 1999, and how I think the hitman is serving 40 years now. And interestingly enough, and I don't know what they do in North Carolina, but Caruth is actually scheduled to get out of prison in 2017. I'm like, if that had happened in Florida, he'd have never seen the light of day
Right.
again, just to be honest with you. But I thought it was ironic that 2 days after that aired, this happened. And from what we know so far, Belcher had gone out partying. Apparently he might have been with another woman the night before. And so we can piece together that maybe there was some type of argument that ensued. But again, where does it go from argument about maybe, having a paramour, an extra girl or something, to I'm going to pump 9 bullets into the brother of my child?
You go from your house to the facility. I mean, you
Right.
You thought that out. That was a thought out process. That's not the act of a mentally unstable person.
Well, they were having marital problems, if you want to call it that, and the team was giving them counseling, and they claimed to have been bending over backwards to help them as a couple, but for relationship issues and not for domestic violence issues. And this person clearly has a violence problem. And we were saying the Jacksonville incident recently was a race issue. This is not a gun issue. This is a domestic violence issue. And I won't purport to know a lot about football, but from what I do understand, only 9 or 10 teams do not currently have a member, the NFL teams do not have a member who has been charged with or convicted of some type of sexual assault or violent crime. That means there's a problem throughout the NFL with its players having violence issues, and they're not being addressed.
From experience, I'm sorry for cutting you off. Tell you from experience, the NFL loves to build young men's characters up. There are a lot of men on the streets today in jobs, working Fortune 500 jobs. They could easily be playing pro football, but the league does not want. They like reclamation projects. So that statistic does not come as a surprise to me.
And you're right. This isn't a gun issue. This guy's 6'5", 250 pounds, all muscle. he shot that young lady 9 times. If he didn't have a gun, she's dead anyway. That's someone who's going to kill that person regardless of what method they're going to use, the rage involved. I think we have to apply Occam's razor here. What's the simplest explanation is he comes home drunk, she confronts him about having a woman, and an argument escalates, ends up with him shooting her. Why? Because he's kind of stupid and he has poor impulse control. That's the simplest answer. Realizes what he's done, and then carries about the rest of what's a rather sordid tale of bizarrely going to the facility to thank the coach and the general manager before, killing himself. My first thought when I heard this story was, this guy did it in the wrong order. He needs to, like you said, there's no punishment available.
Right.
And the poor young lady, for, her worst crime she could have possibly done is nag him. Well, if nagging is an offense that some guy feels like he can punish a woman by shooting her 9 times, we're going to be out of women soon.
No doubt about it.
So he has got very poor impulse control. It's his fault. Okay, it's not the NFL's fault. It's not his brain's fault. He did this. He has to wear it.
This might sound insensitive, but did the NFL make the right decision by making the Kansas City Chiefs play last week? That's question 1. And question 2 would be, should his fellow players have even honored him with some of I'm just being honest.
Before we answer those questions,
okay,
this is what I was upset with. I was upset with the fact that the condolences kept going to the NFL and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right.
What are they grieving?
Right.
A maniac running around with a gun that shot his lady? That's what are you grieving? I mean, no one said first our condolences go out to the young lady. I didn't hear that. I heard everything saying NFL,
I agree.
Kansas City Chiefs, Coach Cornell, all of the people that are associated with the league got all of the condolences first.
90% of the people don't even know her name.
Right. And they don't even realize that there was a child that was left in the process.
Right.
And I just wonder sometimes, Cedric, you brought up a point that I found so interesting, which is the concept that there's a certain type of player that the NFL likes in terms of the not so.
Well, I can tell you I was a casualty of that. The NFL does not like types who can speak up, articulate. They claim that they do. Right? The NBA claims that they do. They don't. They want folks that they can control, put under a microscope, and say, "Okay, we have you." It's, to put in some slave terms, it's like a farm system out there.
And Cedric,
it's a plantation system.
And I agree with you. I had some experience with that myself, even playing in regards to. I remember getting derided for needing to go to a Latin club or a brain ball team meeting instead of. You need to be out here and practice, almost like Allen Iverson. And if you're a thinking type of guy, it's not necessarily, you can be as good as you want to be, but at the end of the day, and there are some scholars that do make it into the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt about it. But for the most part, on every level, high school, college, and pro, I mean, I have to say it, you're right, the type of athlete that is loved and adored by so many people are individuals that you would not necessarily want in your house sometimes. Or to date your daughter.
Now, the NFL does not put them on camera, though.
But they're looking for soldiers.
Right.
Looking for guys who will follow orders.
Right.
And it's not a race thing, because I don't think anyone thinks Gronk is.
No. I'm not saying. I'm not saying that.
I'm
that the plantation.
Player who's not that bright. Plays for the Patriots.
I'm not saying that the plantation thing is a race issue.
Right.
I'm saying that's how the players are treated.
Right.
We got field hands and we got masters.
But isn't
Masters
it
are the
interesting, though?
owners. Field hands are the players.
They're willing to offer the therapy for the relationship, and
They only do that because they're entitled to by Goodell. They're being forced to. It's just what the concussion, just like the concussion thing. They were forced to start looking into the concussion thing.
And
at the same time, they should be forced to look into domestic violence. Being a prevalent problem in the NFL.
Because that's a big problem with football players.
But they have an investment in that young man with a signing bonus. So once they hire him, it's important for them to try to keep him on the field.
Right.
And as answer your question, yes, they should have played the game, because a lot of people's livelihoods, not just NFL players, a lot of people that work at that stadium, a lot of people that are traveling to come to that stadium, they should have played the game. And should the players have honored him before the game, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, because they may not have had all the details, because that was 24 hours. They may not have known what we know now. So,
and with that said, Zachary, I'll give you the last word. Cedric, Zachary, Liz, it's been a pleasure. We thank each of you for tuning in to Generation Next, Life and Politics with Chuck Hobbs. Check us out each Sunday right here, where we will discuss all of the hot topics and flashpoints emanating on state, local, national, and international level. It's been my pleasure. See you next week.